What's up everyone, Thralls here once again. I am Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. So courtesy of an album leak, I am able to bring you an early review for a release that I definitely had highlighted for this month. On the 27th of March, Temple of Void will release their new album, The World That Was, out on Shadow King Records. This is the band's third full-length. These guys are from Detroit and formed in 2013 and actually share members with Detroit Death Doomers Acid Witch and crossover thrash band Hellmouth. Now, I instantly became a fan of this band when I heard their album Lords of Death, and then immediately went out and found their album Of Terror and the Supernatural, and these guys have an amazing, super sludgy death doom style, blending groovy death metal with just unbelievable doomy atmosphere. Now, the first two tracks really just echo the values they already have in terms of their songwriting style. It is straightforward death doom, very groovy. I love their vocalist. Their vocalist has a growl that is almost inhuman. It sounds like Swamp Thing gargling a cocktail of battery acid and broken glass. It is just absolutely nasty. And I think they took a little bit of the reverb off on this one in terms of his vocal deliveries, so it loses a bit of that cavernous feel, but it's still just outright heavy. The song is very riff-driven and echoes parts of Finnish death doom, I would say, but mix that with like Florida death metal. So on one hand, you have a band like Hooded Menace, but on the other, they're playing those big chuggy riffs like Cannibal Corpse. So it's a really interesting mix of the two styles. Now, when it comes down to like the lead melodies that come into these songs, they are very, I don't know, creepy. They kind of crawl across the song, or slither rather. They almost kind of remind me a lot of Incantation or Early Death. It just has that weird feel to it that just kind of gives it like an ominous presence. Now, overall, the production on this I think is a bit of improvement on the last two. The production sounds more full. It's still very much raw and gritty, but I think it's more separated cleverly. I think the vocals kind of stand out a little bit out front. They could go back a little bit in favor of maybe more guitars, but not by much. I think the mix overall is pretty solid, and the fact that it sounds more full gives it like an extra crushing weight to it. Now, this song takes a nice little melodic, almost just kind of empty little ambient break. Really kind of reminded me of like Neurosis and those big just little pauses where they pluck a single note, and then slowly builds into a giant death doom breakdown, which just absolutely crushes. And this is where you start to notice a little bit of synth layering on here, but that comes into play more later in the album, and this album takes a really interesting turn. Now, Self-Schism was the first song they actually put out a video for this. This is a very strange song in terms of at least the lead melody that comes on top of it. Runs pretty much like a straight up like old school death metal song, but then this weird, almost disjointed lead melody comes across, and it almost sounds like a dying humpback whale. It's very like drony, and there's a big bend in it or a drop that just kind of makes it sound very creepy. Like, as far as a melody goes in it, it doesn't really have like that big hook when this thing comes in, but at the same time it fits with the song, because the song is sludgy and brooding, and one of the things these guys excel at is atmosphere, and these first two songs sound like they were written in a catacomb, and possibly recorded in it too. The chorus on it also has a very dissonant strum melody on it that, again, doesn't necessarily fit that well, but it works with the atmosphere of the song. It's supposed to be this brooding, sludgy, murky song, and this song is just drenched in murk. Now, again, much like the first song, it takes a cool little melodic break where it kind of builds in with, you know, a dissonant melody and then whispered vocals, which are pretty damn effective on this, and then slowly builds into a tribal rhythm, and then just comes crushing down on you with the weight of 1,000 coffins filled with corpses. Like, I mean, I feel like that's the right sort of imagery for this sort of album. And again, like, the weird melodies that come in almost kind of give it a space rock feel. And again, that's something that's going to come up a little bit later, but this is where you start getting hints that there have been some slight changes to their sound, but at the core they're very much the same band. But as atmospheric as it gets, it really brings in some just bone-crunching riffs with a cool tremolo melody over it. Pretty much what you expect at a death doom, and executed unbelievably well here. Now, we're greeted to a little interlude called A Single Obulus, which is a very pretty acoustic number, and then it slowly starts to build with layered melodies and almost flamenco guitar in there and bongos. Completely removed from the mood of the first two songs. Like, this actually feels kind of happy, which is something that really just doesn't show up in doom at all, or even really death metal. But it was an interesting break, and it kind of prepared me for the interesting changes that would happen later on the album, namely on the next track, Leave the Light Behind. This is more of just a straightforward, almost sort of anthemic death metal march. It has kind of like a later bolt thrower feel, like around Fourth Crusade. It has a nice mid-tempo march to it, and a nice big riff-driven part, like, kind of like Amon Amarth in pretty much every song. It's kind of a war march, but then you get to the chorus, and lo and behold, there are clean vocals here. And I was shocked. In fact, I think I wrote, yeah, cleans, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. I was really not expecting this. And the cleans are executed really well. They're not very poppy or anything like that. They actually fit the mood of the song. They're more in a baritone register and kind of like a tuneful crooning, but almost kind of a groan to it. And they're layered too. The baritone part really carries it, but they have a harmony on top of it that just adds a little bit extra to it. And this chorus is actually repeated again. This wasn't just like a little isolated what the fuck moment. It's something they really wanted to put in there, and it really worked. And style-wise, while it does return to that big bolt thrower-like riff, this takes a shift towards almost post-metal here. The synths play a big part here, especially in the intro. It's almost like a space rock intro. It kind of reminded me of something you'd hear in a Hawkwind song. But when they come in on this bridge, it brings almost a post-metal dynamic, as I brought up before, kind of like a band like Cult of Luna. They're used to just layer the song, and it's just drenched in these cool, spacey synths. And the guitars actually kind of go back in the mix a little bit in favor of the synths, which I thought was completely out of the question on a Death Doom album. But apparently not. This melodic break on here was totally different than any of the melodic breaks in the earlier songs. It's definitely more clean sounding. It's more etherical, like kind of wispy. It isn't the whole like doom mood to it. It doesn't feel depressive or oppressive, anything like that. It just feels lush and beautiful, which are two words I did not think I would be using to describe this album at all, because these guys are just known for just crushing death doom. In fact, I'd say the only part in this song that is even really reminiscent of death metal in general are the vocals, because they still labor the growl on here. And I thought this was a really interesting surprise. Like, I was legit surprised, in fact, when I heard clean vocals come in, but the fact that they went into almost a post-metal part was really cool, and it showed off some musical depth. And it shows they definitely have more to offer than just death doom, and they can integrate it in their overall sound really well. But they return right back to their roots on Casket of Shame, and this one, the guitars sounded a little bit different. They were a little bit crunchier, a little bit almost thrashier. This was definitely more reminiscent of something they would do on their two previous albums. It's very riff-driven, it's very chunky, it has kind of a old-school, like, obituary feel to it. But as the song goes on, like, the riffs get honestly even better and a little bit catchier, too. There are parts in here that remind me of stuff you'd hear on the Sword's first two albums, albeit with death metal growls throughout. Now, like a lot of these songs, since they're a bit longer, they take some interesting little musical turns. This one does take a break where the guitars are essentially hitting kind of a droning note while the synths build up again. And this whole back half of the album is really interesting in terms of what they do with the synths. This one sort of just builds sort of a layer of drone while there's a cool little lead melody coming in. And then, boom, the rest of the song comes in with this massive tremolo melody, reminiscent of, you know, all things Immolation, Morbid Angel, very much just old school death metal. Not a lot of, like, doom feel on this end part. It is just straight up death metal. And Jesus Christ, is it heavy. Now we get to the title track, the closing track, and it is massive. It is the longest song on the album. It's almost 10 minutes long. And I have to say, like, the opening little guitar harmonies really reminded me of Iron Maiden. They're very trad metal, heavy metal sounding. They're not very doom-laden. They actually feel kind of, I don't know, not upbeat, but not doom-laden, I guess. That's pretty much the only way I can really put it there. Now, this song is, for the most part, a straight-up epic death doom song. So, very much along the lines of My Dying Bride and Paradise Lost, and just driven by huge, massive riffs. And this time the keys are pretty much throughout, except they're like almost like a gothic choir behind it. Very strong writing in here, though I think they may have missed an opportunity to throw in some more cleans here, because this song would have lended itself really well to cleans, you know, much like what you'd hear in a Paradise Lost or My Dying Bride song. Those moments where it sounds extra sorrowful and sad, somber, all those wonderful depressing S-words. Some real emotive, sad, clean sung vocals in here really could have just made the song rise up a bit. Not that the growls are bad, I think the growls are excellent on here. I just kind of expected, since I heard cleans earlier on a part that caught me off guard, this was where they would have made a little bit more sense to me. But this song takes so many interesting turns. The keys drop back, and then all of a sudden it shifts into just straightforward death metal again. And this is a cool moment because it kind of brings you out of the sludgy depression and into just pretty much a riffy headbanger of a moment here. Strong songwriting once again, and I like how this song, while not necessarily progressive, has progressive leanings in terms of the song structure, because it's really written in movements here. Because this takes another turn after here where they drop out the guitars for a bit and it's just the bass and the drums going, and then a more atmospheric guitar riff comes in, and then all of a sudden we're greeted to what I think sounds like a Thin Lizzy guitar harmony, like something you would hear in the song Emerald. Again, something that really caught me off guard, and it really worked here. It didn't detract from the song, it doesn't detract from their overall sound, it just really broadens it. This song is the very definition of dynamic right up until the closer, which gives you the big show closer where everyone's just going nuts to the instruments, you get the long fills and everything, and it just feels like a nod to all things metal. There are moments in the songs that seem to echo classic metal, even classic rock, progressive metal in terms of the song structure, straight up death metal, thrash metal. And this song just pretty much encapsulates the overall feel of this album, where they were really trying to push themselves musically and show they had more musical depth than their previous albums. And I have to say, they definitely impressed me on this one. So overall, I'm going to give this album 4 stars. This is a killer release from these guys. Definitely more musically adventurous. There are parts in here that might alienate their fan base in terms of throwing in clean vocals or going along the lines of post-metal or even post-rock. And it's an interesting moment for this band because they might shift over to that sound a little bit more or even regress back to their earlier sound. So this is kind of a fork in the road moment. But overall, this is a really adventurous, rewarding listen. I like hearing a band grow from release to release, and these guys have gotten better with each release. I think the production was excellent on this one. I think it was better than previous albums. And musicianship is a huge step up, and they wrote a lot of different stuff on here that I was not expecting. There were like a lot of legit surprises on this. And that doesn't happen as often as I'd like it to. And I love the fact that it really just kind of legit surprised me, and I was wrong about what I thought I was going to get on here. Great listen. I'd say go out and pick this up, but I think record stores are closed, so definitely order this, download it, whatever. It's an awesome album. Definitely check it out. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, definitely subscribe, because if you subscribe, you are entered in our giveaway for a Cryptopsy hoodie. Once we hit 1,000 subs, which is not far off now, I think we're at like 980 something. We are going to do a randomizer, and one of you lucky people are going to get a Cryptopsy hoodie. Corona free, I promise. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for subbing and supporting us. We love you guys, and we will be back with more reviews. Catch you later.